Hello and welcome to The Cyber Den, your weekly dose of tech and games. I, Jake, will be chatting with Interceptor Entertainment and 3D Realms' audio master, composer, and fellow metalhead, Andrew Hulshult. Thanks for coming, mate.
Thanks for having me. How you doing?
Pretty good myself, pretty good. Things are always great here on The Cyber Den.
I would hope so.
Now, Andrew, please tell everyone listening what got you interested in composing music.
Okay, if we go all the way back to what first got me into music, it's kind of a weird one because, honestly, I grew up on pretty much gangster rap. Like the Tupacs, the Biggies, the Jay-Z's, that kind of stuff. That's really what first got me into music, and that was from my brother, who really, really loved that stuff. He got introduced to it. We both got introduced to it in a young age in the early 90s, and that was right when all that stuff was going on between Biggie and Tupac, and they were like the biggest things in the world. But as I got a little bit older, I started developing a taste for more aggressive music. I was kind of a little bit more of an outcast at school. I wasn't like I was the gaming geek kid, so it was always like, all right, well, after school, I'm going to go home and play Duke Nukem 3D on my PC. It's like, why don't you play it on a Nintendo? It's like, it's not out yet, man. But, yeah, like I was a little bit of an outcast in that sense. And I couldn't find really a way to express myself other than, going home, playing some video games. But I kind of started getting introduced to more and more aggressive music from the few friends that I had. Bands like Korn, Metallica, Mudvayne, at the very, very early stuff with them, and that all started hitting kind of a note with me because I had a lot of frustration and I had no outlet for it. I mean, I could sit there with a game and play it all day, but what I really wanted to do is I wanted to have a voice with something. So that spoke to me on a different level, and I went on to get a guitar and kind of learn how to play that because I was like, man, I want to figure out what these guys are doing and how they're getting those sounds, because that strikes a chord with me. So that's kind of where I started with everything,
You pretty much just summed up my life there, except in your case with music, but my case, radio, talking about games on the Cyber Den, voice acting, things like that. Really freaky. Where is it that you get your inspiration from? Are there any particular composers or musicians out there who have inspired your choices?
I'll catch a lot of flack for this one, but a lot of my influences are it goes back to the people that you would normally go, oh yeah, well they're great, obviously, but I really like listening to compositions from Hans Zimmer. It's just, somebody said it right whenever they were like, yeah, he made orchestras cool again. He made compositions cool again for music. It's like, yeah, that sounds a little stock, because he does one thing and he does it really well, which makes like the big epic stuff. But again, it's more aggressive and it's got a big build up, so that struck a tune with me. The other stuff that I would say, Trent Reznor is a really, really big one of mine. He's amazing with almost everything that he does. Everybody falls sometimes and doesn't make the greatest things. But just about everything that he's done is pretty much spot on whenever it comes to production and, what he's trying to convey and get out. And like old school thrash really speaks to me as well. Slayer, Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, all that kind of stuff. It's all just one big, pretty much influence for me. I'm gonna take it from one of those sources. And of course, there's plenty more. I could go over 100 here, but those are the ones that whenever I'm sitting down and I'm like, man, I need to think up something different, that I'll focus on one of those and go, okay, well, maybe I can, take a page here and, write it my own way. So that's kind of where those influences kind of started off from. And it's still where I go back to, where I'm I'm not pulling pages out of their book, but I'm studying the book that they all wrote, you know?
Let's talk about your latest soundtrack for the upcoming top-down shooter Bombshell. What were your inspirations and aims for this soundtrack specifically? And what was the development process for each track like?
The sound for Bombshell was originally, we wanted to do almost like a movie score. When I was told that, whenever Fred brought that idea up, I was like sweating pretty hard. What he was saying was, hey, let's, put together these big symphonic things and we'll have drones and we'll do this and that. I mean, like, he didn't come out and say it like that, but all the references that he showed me were exactly down that alley. And a lot of that stuff, you can't write it like I would have with the Rot soundtrack, where it's like, okay, here, a verse of this, a chorus. It's not formulaic. It's you build to a certain feel, and you just let it go wherever it goes. And if it sucks at the very end, you scrap it because it's not going to pass. That's not going to fly. So it was pretty much geared towards a movie soundtrack as far as that. And a lot of the influences came, honestly, I was listening to a lot of the Deus Ex soundtrack. There's a lot of moments on that where I'm like, man, that's beautiful. I would love to be able to do that. And I was kind of pulling pages back and forth from the Hans Zimmer's Man of Steel soundtrack as well. But there's also some hints in there of some really, really heavy stuff, like Meshuggah-esque. It's not off time or anything like that, but it's tuned low and it's got a lot of low end to it. But yeah, that's as far as what the sound more or less is. And I'm really excited about it because I've never done anything like this before, and I got kind of the okay and the go-ahead from both 3DR and Interceptor. They're like, hey, you know what? If you suck at it, we'll figure out something else, but we believe in you, and we think that you can do that. So we're going to let you try that out, and we're going to sit back and watch. And sure enough, when I got done with a couple tracks, I mean, I was not confident. I handed it to him and I was like, I don't know. I don't even know what direction I'm going. And I gave it to him. They're like, this is amazing. Keep building on this. So, I was like, okay. I'm pretty humble about it, and I'll take direction by all means when it's coming from me, because it's always someone else's perspective. So I ran with it, and it turned out to be something really beautiful. So I'm really proud of that. As far as the development process side of it, was pretty simple and laid out. When we started, yes, it was like the whole movie soundtrack, but it got washed back and forth between, well, now we want, the metal stuff to show up, and I would kind of fight back and forth between the guys, and I'd say, hey, look, we either do this one way or we do it the other, because if you mix the two right now, it's not going to be good. It's just going to seem like a string of ideas that don't gel. So there was a time when we were fighting a little bit back and forth on what certain things should sound like. For instance, this is crazy, but there was, I believe, and this is a number that I'm pulling up, but I'm pretty sure of it, there was 20 different versions of the actual theme before we came to a conclusion on what we wanted to do. Like, there was the one with the original trailer that I don't like to talk about anymore, but it's still out there. There's one with the original trailer, and that one's cool, but it's not the attitude that Bombshell came out to be. And once I figured out at the very end of development what she was, like what we were working with, you know, I went back and actually did a lot of work at the very end and kind of retuned everything. But yeah, there was a lot of stuff back and forth. One of the biggest things, I think, honestly, was the implementation of dynamic action tracks. Like whenever some crazy stuff is going on, you know, a different piece of music will kick in. So one of the things that I would do with that was I'd study the initial world track that we've got going on there, and I'd say, okay, what's a good way to accent this? And this is going back to saying, you know, hey, we would kind of argue over what would work and what wouldn't, which was they wanted almost like a Mad Max-esque kind of feel for almost all of those, and I was like, no, it can't be like that for all of them. You have to ramp it up to the game. It has to create a feel as you go through. So as you go through the game, the first world that you're in is mostly compositions just with like strings and some electronic stuff. So I wanted to do that, but I just wanted to make that more aggressive whenever those moments came in. Whenever the crazy parts start happening and you're surrounded by enemies, I wanted those to kick in, but I didn't want it to feel like, you know, whoa, what just happened? You know, like just get kind of cheesy with like the rock and metal stuff. I wanted to actually compose like, you know, a couple minutes worth of something and then throw it in to where it would be ramped up, but still in the same key, so it feels like the same song, so that whenever it fades back out, it's all good. But yeah, that's one of the things that was really cool. It was also an idea later on in development, so it took some time, and I was like, oh man, whenever the idea was thrown up, because I knew I was gonna have to do a lot more music, but it was totally worth it in the end. Fred's got some good direction, and he has a vision for sure. He's got some ideas that they don't look like they work sometimes, but whenever you get to the end of the line with it, it's normally cool on the audio side. Like that's my experience with him on the music side for sure. He's pushed me for quite some years, and I'm extremely thankful for that. But yeah, that's some little tidbits on the Bombshell soundtrack.
I definitely enjoyed your covers that you did for Rise of the Triad 2013. You even released some remixed versions, some redone versions. What was it like working on those then?
The Rise of the Triad, the remix, that soundtrack came out super late, and I wasn't, you know, super happy about it, but under the circumstances, I totally understood. Whenever it came down to the very end, and I'm like, finally, I get to put out my baby. Thank God, this is, you know, what got me first started in this, so let's do this. Dave Oshry got a hold of me, our marketing director on Rise of the Triad, and he was like, hey, we should remix and remaster all 30 of these. And I was like, jeez, dude, that is an undertaking. And we already had a date set up with Valve. I think we had 2 weeks. Yeah. So we had 2 weeks to actually put this stuff together and get the ball rolling. And he was like, hey, so are you in? And I said, hey, look, I need 24 hours to think about this, man, because I'm going to be honest, like the idea of that right now is stressing me out. I would love to go back and make these sound even better now that I've learned a little bit more about the tools that I was using. And, you know, I wasn't super strained by the clock while figuring out how to use all this stuff and obviously apply it. That would be great. I pretty much took a day to myself and was like, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to do this? And it came down to the same question that always comes down, where it's like, hey, how bad do you want this? And how bad are you willing to one day possibly become one of those top 10 guys? And, you know, I pigeonholed myself into that. And I was like, well, all right, here we go. So I started remixing these and sending them over to Dave and Terry, and they really liked them. But man, in 2 weeks, I went through 30 tracks and literally rebuilt all of the drum tracks, rebuilt all of the bass tracks, and rebuilt just about all the synth tracks. Right after I was done with that, I rebuilt the mastering section on it so that it wasn't too hot and it wasn't clipping or anything like that over all of them. And I did this in 2 weeks, and I damn near lost my mind. And this was right before QuakeCon, where I'm supposed to go to a booth and talk about Bombshell and do all this stuff. And it was literally the night before, like, Fred got there, and we were all having a good time, just having some drinks in the Hilton Anatole. And he was like, okay. He was like, you know, you're going to go back up to the room? We're about to hit it. It's 10 o'clock. And I was like, I got to go back to the house, man, and finish up the OST. And he's like, you're not done? Like, no, I've still got one more track to finish up, and then we're done. So I went back and finished it up, and it was literally 3 in the morning when I finished everything up, packaged it up, sent it over to Apogee for them to review it, said, this should be good, we should be fine, just send it over to Valve, and we're good. And they did. And I literally didn't get to the hotel till about 4:30, passed out, woke up at 7 a.m., went down to the booth, and we started, you know, talking about Bombshell. That was the craziest couple days I can remember in a long time because I was so stressed out. Just, I had to keep my composure the entire time. But yeah, as far as the Rot remixes, I put so much time into those. Oh my lord. But yeah, that's just a cool story I wanted to share real quick.
On a personal note, what are your favourite soundtracks in video games? And what tracks that you have composed or remixed are your fondest?
Okay, so some of my favorite soundtracks in gaming. Obviously the Doom soundtrack, like anything from Doom or Doom 2. Even the expansion pack stuff was great as well. Final Doom and the Plutonia Experiment. All that stuff was great. Bobby, Prince, and Lee Jackson are awesome. Everybody knows it. The Unreal Tournament soundtrack was also a really, really big one for me. Like, that was honestly probably my first introduction to electronic music in general. And I remember thinking, what is this? I've never even heard this in a game before. This is awesome. And the more I played it, the more it grew on me. And man, like, that soundtrack is burned into my head. Especially, I can't think of it off the top of my head right now, but the tune from Facing Worlds, that level in general was like, whoa. Like, it's like, this is great. It's atmospheric. I'm in space. This track just works. But the other tracks that I would say is Quake, obviously, is a really good one because John Romero went to Trent Reznor and was like, hey, we don't really want, you know, songs, we want feelings more than anything else. We want, you know, to create an atmosphere. And he did that really well because it was really good and terrifying at times. Gosh, Duke 3D, obviously, because it's the first time I felt like in a game where there was an actual action soundtrack to a game. I was like, wow, this is action movie music. This is great. I like some of the stuff from Mortal Kombat and Mortal Kombat 2, honestly. Those are really cool too. Those are great. And you know, you can't forget Rise of the Triad. That goes without saying, but I'm going to throw it out there as well. Rot was awesome. But outside of that, like, trying to think, what's some of yours? I'm curious.
Ooh, that's an interesting question. You know, I've never actually had anyone pass the question on back to me, to be honest. Two come to mind. Frank Klepacki and his Command & Conquer soundtrack. I absolutely love the Command & Conquer series and how he was able to kind of mold together different themes like industrial rock, funk, ambience, electronica, things like that. He kind of molded them into this eclectic mix in many of his Command & Conquer games, and I thought it's just brilliant how he managed to do so, how he managed to keep things really diverse. So I really enjoy listening to Frank Klepacki's Command & Conquer stuff. Another one has to be Jesper Kyd.
Oh, yeah.
Of the Hitman series.
Yeah.
Again, I'm a big fan of the Hitman series, and I love the Hitman soundtracks. It's so brilliant when it comes to brewing up tensions, whether it's sneaking around or you've just been caught and the guards are chasing after you.
Yeah. He also, like, those first couple games, man, that music was really weird for the time, because it was really strange. There was moments where it's like, wow, this music actually sounds psychotic, especially in the second Hitman.
Do you mean the Hitman Contract soundtrack?
Yeah, Contracts, I'm sorry. Yeah, super dark. Yeah, that's the one I'm thinking of, actually. Yes, you hit the nail on the head on that one. As far as, like, yeah, you hit the nail on the head on that, by the way. But those are all awesome. Going back to the original question, I would say that, like, the one of my favorites to actually redo was from the Doom soundtrack, and it was actually what locked in post Rise of the Triad, where I was figuring out where, like, you know, some, like, how my sound was going to sound as far as mixing drum kits and mixing guitars and bass and synths together and making it not sound too cheesy, making it work. Was for fun whenever I was doing the IDKFA album, was Dark Halls. That was awesome. That was a lot of fun. I had no idea what I was going to do for that song, and I just went into it, and I was like, you know what? If I had a guitar with a tremolo effect, that would be kind of cool. And I ran with it, and it was just, you know, for the purists that listen to that soundtrack, I was like, okay, the drum beat has to stay pretty close to the same, almost the entire song does, but it just needs to sound like it was created this year. And by the time I was done with that, man, I still go back and listen to that, and I'm like, I can't reproduce this. This is awesome. Like, it's one of those moments where you're like, everything just worked, and I wish this was on a AAA title release, because this would be awesome. But it was great. That was one of my favorite ones to do, and of course, E1M1 was a good one, and that one's gotten a lot of attention from the Brutal Doom soundtrack, or I'm sorry, the Brutal Doom 2.0 release, and the IDKFA release as well. And one more that I would pick out that was a lot of fun was Quake 2 Quad Machine. You can't go wrong with that one. That's another good soundtrack. That soundtrack's awesome though. Like, that's ridiculously good. But yeah, those are the ones I would say I enjoyed the most, and I'm pretty proud of.
Andrew, thank you so much for coming to this interview on Siren FM 107.3.
Yeah, thanks for having me, of course.
And I would also like to thank my dear listeners out there for once again tuning in to this interview on the Cyber Den, your weekly dose of tech and games. Thanks for coming, Andrew. See you later.
Take it easy. Have a good one.